Moving on, we got corrections. These are two lovely employees of, or that work in the Waukesha County Jail. Mock is day shift corrections officer, and Lauren works in mental health in the jail. So you take it away.
All right, a little bit about me real quick, and that Officer Mock Miller, just call me Mock. I'll apologize right now, I'm sure you guys have been warned, and that I tend to cuss a little. And that, so if the word fuck offends you, I apologize right now, okay? So I've been with the department for about 15 years now, and then we're just gonna kind of give you guys a rundown of what the jail looks like, what I do, what Lauren does. We kind of got half the time that we normally have, so I'm gonna kind of do my best to, because I get winded, so I kind of like tend to babble, but I'll try to keep it down. So this is our jail. We house about, on average, about 530 inmates. A lot of things that a lot of people don't know is that, like you guys just said, P&P here. Obviously, we get P&P, people that are on probation and parole, and that. But what a lot of people don't realize about the Waukesha County Jail is we house federal inmates as well. So when a federal inmate comes in and stuff like that, I don't get to know anything about them, and that except they're on a federal hold. So he or she could be there for 300 murders, be a serial killer, could be a drug dealer, could be a counterfeiter. I don't get to know any of that stuff. Let's see. We also, any officer that works at the county jail, we're also cross-trained at our Huber facility. Numbers are way down at the Huber facility right now, but usually between the two facilities, we're usually around 550 inmates, roughly. Let's see, electronic monitoring, that's kind of becoming a thing of the past, at least for Waukesha. I mean, the current administration has it so that if you're on electronic monitoring, we do have the capabilities to put people on EM, but most of the time, it's a transfer. It ends up going to Milwaukee, Jefferson County, things of that nature, and then until we revamp our system. Inside the jail, we have obviously an intake area, and that which is where everything starts. We kind of set the tone, and that as an intake officer, you got to remember when they come in, and it's really kind of hard to grasp, even for people that are in law enforcement, really, because when they come in, we take everything from them. I mean, they have to ask me for toilet paper. And that, they get nothing. So you got to kind of put yourself in them. And so even the most like mild-mannered person is pretty freaked out when they come in. And then we get the problem children, and we'll get into them later. And but that's kind of where everything kind of sets the tone. I'm sure your instructors have told you, and that the difference between corrections and being an on-the-road cop is, at least I have toys that I can play with to get somebody to comply, okay? But my number one tools are what's between my ears and what's underneath my nose. If you cannot talk to people, corrections and law enforcement, you might as well start looking for something else now. And especially in today's society, I mean, everybody's watched the news and we know what's going on in the world, right? So, and the ability to be able to talk to people and is number one, foremost, the most important thing that we have, okay? What else we got? I just want to, I'll come back to some of this stuff and that, but inside the jail, we have an intake area, and that, like I said, that's where everything starts. We kind of set the tone for everything, kind of let the inmates know what we're going to expect, okay? Once they're in the facility, and that, what our corrections lieutenants do is they handle all the paperwork, they handle the release process, and then they determine where, depending on charges, a history with that individual, and that where they're going to initially be housed, okay? And we basically have 3 places where we can house people. And that we have our pod 2, which is, for lack of a better term, it's the hole, okay? So high bails, serious charges, things of that nature, okay? Or if they were a problem for us the last time they were there. I mean, I've had guys that have come in with $50 bails that everything's fuck you, and so obviously I'm not going to put them in like a general population area, right? So, so they look into that stuff as well. And then we have pod 1, which is our special needs pod. Now, our special needs pod is unfortunately one of our smallest units, but where it's the most important unit in the jail, because not only do we have people that are in there because you can be in there for a broken arm, or you have stitches in your head, a cast on your arm, okay? You're elderly and you can't walk so good. I mean, but we also have our schizophrenics, our people that are going through alcohol and drug withdrawals in there. All of our mental health people end up in there. It is, if we can ever set up a tour for you guys, I could spend a whole day just showing you and talking to you stories about pod 1. So those are like basically like closed custody, and then we have medium housing, and that, which is our pods 4 and 5, which is like, it's still secure housing, and that, but it's like a lot of our probation parole people are in there. Short timers, and that you got like a forfeiture where, pay or stay as we call them too, and that we're $150 or 5 days in jail. It's medium housing. And then we have our direct housing, okay? So I'm gonna kind of go direct and then go backwards, okay? So direct is like the creme de la creme of our inmates. So it's not just based upon like, if the charges aren't there. I mean, we've had people that were there accused of murder that made it to our direct housing, okay? It all depends on how they act in the jail and stuff like that. In that direct housing, there'll be up to 48 inmates and one officer, okay? And that officer is armed only with OC. And actually, that just recently changed, and that where the officer was allowed to carry pepper spray. So imagine yourself in there with potentially up to 48 really nasty individuals, and all you have is your mind and your mouth. So again, that's why I'm saying the ability to be able to talk to people is foremost, okay? So we, in those direct pods, we only have 4 of those direct pods. So like I said, up to 48 inmates, okay? And that, but then now what we do on a daily basis is we're responsible for all their needs while they're in the jail, okay? I'll dive deeper into intake in that, but again, toilet paper, soap, we feed them. We tell them exactly when they're going to eat, when they're not going to eat. We tell them what time they have to go to bed. I mean, it's kind of, like I said, if you really kind of sit back and think about it, it's a shock it would be a shock for anybody. But now put yourself in that situation where you were in the wrong spot at the wrong time, made the wrong decision or something like that, and now this happened to you. And that you can't even really grasp it. I mean, everybody's got a phone now, right? I mean, how many people can go a day or an hour without looking at their phone? Okay, you're one. But so now you got a 60-day sentence or a 60-day sanction from probation and parole. Now you're gonna go 60 days without that phone or you talk to your brother or your mom or your dad every day, and I'm gonna tell you when you can call them and when you can't call them. So. Where do I want to go here now?
But even like starting at intake, so imagine that somebody's coming into the facility and this is their first stop. What kind of people, especially on the road, who are you getting that's coming into custody? How are those people acting? What are their behaviors like? What's going on with them that you're arresting them and bringing them in?
They're all happy, right? Everybody wants to see a cop, right?
Yeah, so what type of behavior do you think that we're seeing when you guys as officers perhaps are bringing somebody into the jail? What was that? Combative? Agitated? Intoxicated. So now you guys have done your part, and that's why, when Mock says that communication is key, for officers on the road, that's great. Your job is done, you've got them all jacked up, you're dropping them off. We're stuck with them for maybe the next couple years. So when it comes to communication for especially the jail staff, these aren't people that we're going to have a couple minutes with and then we get to go on our merry way. We're stuck with them for a very long time. Especially the intoxicated people. Has anybody like EMT or worked in this type of environment and dealt with somebody that's intoxicated? No? Mock, what's it like working with somebody that comes in and they're messed up?
It's fantastic. I mean, no, I mean, everybody knows somebody that's been drunk, right? I mean, your uncle, maybe one of your buddies, you know. How rational are those people when they're under the influence? Not at all, right? So, you know, you get.
They're having fun though. When we get them, it's not fun anymore.
Well, I mean, and if you want to get into corrections, and that absolutely fantastic, okay. If you want to be an on-the-road cop, just remember, if you're going to be an on-the-road cop, remember one thing, okay? If you think you're doing the jail a favor by jacking somebody up and getting them all sorts of fired up before you drop them off, you're not. Because you have them for 10 minutes, and like Lauren said, then I might have them for, you know, the next 2 years potentially. You know, and like I said, everything starts right there at the intake part of it. The intake process, and that unlike other jails, and that us as corrections, I do the pictures and prints on the people. I also take their med screens. So I'm talking to them, and here's a shock too, that do you think people lie to me when I'm talking to them about their medical history? Oh yeah, absolutely. But surprisingly, if you have somebody that takes a whole handful of medications, and some of those medication, you know, they can't spell their name half the time, but they can spell, you know, whatever medication they're on. Because when they come into the jail, what do they want? They're going to want their meds, right? So, and again, that's just another thing that we take from them, you know. And they'll say, well, I came in with my meds. Well, when they come in with their meds, we have to get, you know, I don't know what happened to that pill bottle. I don't, you know. So so they have to get everything from us, and being trained on what to look for and how somebody's talking to you, because like just simple pauses, and that if I say, are you thinking of hurting yourself? No. Whoa, what did that tell me? You know, you had to think about that question for a second, you know, I mean, you know, or, you know, when was the last time you used, you know, I don't use, and then I ask a question down the road, and that on the same process, and well, you know, I was pretty messed up last night. Well, okay, well then the last night's when you use, right? So now I got to go back, you know. So, any parents in here? Anybody a parent? No. Okay. So, if your son or daughter is lying to you, you know they're lying, right? So I don't want to like really generalize it that bad, but picture kind of dealing with the adult version of your child. They lie to us, and so you got to try to kind of sift through the bullshit and find out what's true and what's not true. And not all of them. I mean, there's some people that just come, honest to God, there's people that just come in and they want to do their time and get out of there. But it's getting worse, people. Like I said, I've been doing this job for 15 years, okay? And our clientele, when I first started, we'll make it real easy for you, okay? When I first started, I'd go in to get gas in this uniform, and I'd have little kids come up to me and go, do you have any baseball cards? This is true story. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm getting gas. Some middle-aged lady comes rolling up, I'm in uniform, rolls down her window, and says, how's it feel to be a fascist asshole? Big difference. Yeah, well, I mean, what do you say to that? You have a nice day, ma'am. You know, it's not what I wanted to say, but. So, I mean, the job's changed in that, and it's, even if you're on the road, it's the ability to be able to talk to people. I train, as a matter of fact, I'm doing it this week, so I'm actually kind of hoarse today. But I train what's called interpersonal communications for the jail. And it's like a form of, like, you guys probably heard of verbal judo. And that's all, it's how to talk to people, because if you're talking to somebody, and especially like we said in intake, and that was where I'm trying to extract as much information from somebody as I possibly can. If you ask a yes or no question, what are you going to get? Oh man, I'm like boring you guys to sleep, aren't I? You're going to get a yes or no answer, right? So it's asking those open-ended questions, and get to try to extract as much information as I can. So the more information that I can pull out of somebody when I first have my first interactions, the more information I can relay to my lieutenants and my captains to let them know, hey, this guy's like just like spacing out and that just kind of just going through the motions and, like a real blank look. Or I've had people where I'm asking the questions and I get the 1,000-yard stare the entire time. You guys know what the 1,000-yard stare is, okay? And that's all, but that's all information that pick cues I got to pick up on, and that, or if, like you can tell, well, after being trained for a while, the schizophrenics, and that you can almost like, some of them, you can almost pick up on the fact that something else is going on, something else is occupying them, just when they're just staring at you and talking to you. Does anybody know anybody that's schizophrenic? Okay.
So what does that look like? What does schizophrenia present as? Does anybody know what kind of the defining features of that is? Okay, hallucinations. Delusions. Yeah, so what would a delusion be? Has anybody taken a psych class? Yeah, I would definitely suggest it, like Mark said, going into any type of law enforcement. You're going to deal with people in crisis on a daily basis. If you don't know what you're looking at or you don't know what you're dealing with, you're not going to be successful. So if you're walking up on somebody and they're having hallucinations and delusions and you don't know what that is or what that looks like, you're putting yourself and everybody else in danger. So what are types of hallucinations?
Go ahead.
You could be like a person, kind of like in another room or like in that room, trying to like threatening them.
Yeah. So hearing things, a lot of them will hear things. And again, most people with schizophrenia, they're not hearing and seeing like rainbows, unicorns, and sunshine. It's like really scary stuff. So besides hearing things, most people with schizophrenia are seeing things. There's tactile hallucinations where they're feeling things crawling on them. They smell things. All of your senses are taken over. So you as a police officer, you're walking out and somebody's in crisis and they're acting bizarre. If you don't know these types of things, that's scary. Also, most people with schizophrenia, their delusions are government-based. So you're already setting yourself up for a disadvantage just by being in law enforcement. They're already scared of you. They're scared of the government. They're scared of police. So you're walking into a situation where they're already fearful, and if you don't know how to deal with them, again, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. And same with walking into corrections. You have to know what you're looking at. Like Mark said, we're seeing a lot of new things. Has anybody heard of drug-induced psychosis? Or what that looks like? Because it looks like schizophrenia. So you have somebody that's coming in that's messed up on designer drugs, they're taking K2, they're doing all these different things, and they are fully psychotic and trying to weed out if this is mental illness or this is because they took a bunch of fucked up drugs. Like, you have to know that too. I can have one. Okay. So again, knowing the difference between those things. Mark, what's somebody with substance-induced psychosis? He has good stories. So who's somebody you can think of and what did that look like?
Well, it got to the point where we had a guy that honest to God, I think to this day, we don't even know what exactly he took. Metro was kind of doing like their investigation on him, and he was like, he took designer drugs and that, and then he also, there was talk that he was on LSD, and also other drugs that he took were he was actually taking in rat poison.
Oh, yeah. He was poisoned before he came in, so he was
Well, and okay, I'm not the tallest guy in the world, but okay, trust me, at the jail, if I got beef and I need beef to go in on somebody, we always make sure it's a fair fight. If we have to go in on somebody, it's usually 6 or 7 of us on one of them. And some of the guys that I have that at my tools are 6'6", 6'8", played college football. I feel sorry for their mothers because I wouldn't want to feed any of these guys. They're huge. So, half of them I could probably ride into the sun. But we had three of our biggest guys, and when I was trying to subdue this guy, because we had to get him out of his cell, it was time for him to go to court, okay? And 15, 20 minutes with three of my biggest guys on this guy, he just would not give up. tased him 3 times.
Felt nothing.
Felt nothing. Until the last one where we had a probe up here, and I got him on the bottom of the foot, and I don't know if you guys know about tasers, and that the longer the span, the better the reaction. Right after that, it was, what do you want me to do, sir? But just like that, he snapped out of it. But again, I mean, that's a situation where we kind of knew what was going on. The most of the time that I'm walking around in there, or we're walking around in the jail, it's just me. It could be me and 48 of them. Now, I have tools that I can use that if something's going astray, I have a duress alarm, which I'm not wearing right now, obviously, but I press that, and within about 15 or 20 seconds, roughly, that's when the cavalry's coming, okay? Now, everybody's been in a fight? No, nobody's been in a fight? Okay. Picture fighting with somebody, and you're waiting and you don't know what they're gonna do to you, and that you're fighting for 15 or 20 seconds, and that waiting for everybody to come. That's the longest 15 or 20 seconds of your life. Okay, so that's just the nature of the business, and again, being able to talk to people and stuff like that, and get compliance, talking, and that is huge. Another thing that we do at the jail is we do random shakedowns and stuff like that. We're responsible for, like I said, feeding them, getting them to and from the court, getting them released when it's time for them to get released. I'm trying to cover all the. But the biggest thing when you're talking, I just know this from other classes, and the biggest thing with inmates is respect. Okay. Now, that just because you're talking about respect doesn't mean that it's carte blanche and they get whatever they want. But I'm not there, and my job is not to be judge, jury, and executioner for them. My job is to make sure that they're safe, I'm safe, and the facility stays, and nobody gets out that's not supposed to get out. Okay? That doesn't mean that the perception that I walk around and I drag a stick across bars and they get bread and water, that's the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, we should have some pictures of like our actual pods.
Yeah.
So, has anybody seen the jail? Anybody been in there? Because you guys do some tours, right?
Not this year.
But like, all right, that's like, all right, like pod 1 is, like I said, that's our medical pod or our special needs pod. Inside there, we can have up to like 29 or 30 inmates. Okay, it's kind of hard for me to see this, but the only real differences in there is there's 2 officers that are stationed in this pod. Okay, one stays at the desk and the other one walks through. The one at the desk controls all the doors for that officer to go through. Okay. Here's another news flash, okay? Being that person at that desk, if Lauren's my security officer, the one that's walking around, and she gets jumped, what do you think I have to do? Do I run in there? No. It's my job to make sure that I get the cavalry coming. Okay, and I've been in situations in my 15 years where I've been the officer that's been assaulted, and I've also been the officer at the desk, okay? So it's the worst feeling in the world. It's every correctional officer's worst day, okay? The difference are, now here in pod 1, and that where we have, it's by design, and that you can see all the windows, and that the inmates are allowed to see out. Why would we have it so that in a special needs pod where I have schizophrenics, people with mental disease, why would I want them to be able to see what I'm doing? Oh, work with me, people.
So they don't think conspiracies that much?
Yeah, to an extent, yeah. But they feel safe. A lot of times somebody that's going through stuff, and that if they can see and they know that I'm watching them, and that they feel safer knowing that we're there and we're in charge of them. Okay? It might be somebody, like I said, it might be somebody's first time in jail that's like really freaking out. Okay, I'd want to know If it was my first time and not knowing anything about a jail and I was going to jail, I'd want to know people are watching me, and not the guy in the cell next to me, right? So that's why we have it so that there's not a mirror on this, and that when we get to like pod 2, was it the next one? Pod 2, like I said, is the whole, okay? Again, 2 officers, okay? 1 officer stays at the desk, and the other officer walks through and is actually the security officer, okay? But now it's kind of laid out the same, but we also have our ADSEG units, which are our smaller units. That's not on there. And that's those people that only come out for basically their 1 hour a day. That's our worst of our worst, okay? But now all those windows have mirrors on them so that they can't see that, they don't need to see what's going on the outside. They don't need to know how many officers are out there. They don't need to know any of that information, and you still have that same responsibility as watching that other officer going through. That's one of our SEG units, okay? So those people that typically are in there are problem children. They've been in fights. They've assaulted staff or attempted to assault staff. They might have come from another facility where another facility couldn't handle them. And at Waukesha, we seem to be really good at that. Like, well, you can't handle them, we'll take them, But then they can actually work their way out of here. Like I said, I mean, I've had people that have been accused of murder and that actually made it all the way from the hole in SEG like this, and that all the way up to our direct supervision pods, okay? So this is our close custody. So pod 1 and pod 2 are close custody, okay? When you go to our next one, should be our medium housing. Oh, pod 3 is an inmate worker and that. So once you've made it all the way up to the direct supervision pods, and that you have to pass a physical, you have to have a bail under $5,000, and it can't be any violent offense that you're there for. And then you could actually you're gonna hear some people call them trustees, okay? Well, they're inmates. Do you ever trust an inmate? So I don't use the word trustee, they're inmate workers. And it can actually work time off of their sentence because it's usually, municipal charges and stuff like that, speeding tickets, stuff like that. Pod 4 and pod 5 are basically laid out the same. That's our medium housing. Again, it's mirrored but there's different units inside the units. Okay, so you have 2 officers again, and that 1 officer goes through, the other officer is the security officer watching that officer. This is like where, okay, you're not bad enough to be in the hole, and that your charges don't justify you being in close custody, but we really don't know you yet. We'll kind of like experiment you up here and that. The only difference between pods 4 and 5 is in 15 years, and that this population's getting bigger and bigger too, that we house females in pod 4 as well. So, I mean, we have an ADSEG unit for our females, which is in pod 4 as well. So it's another small unit. Again, they only come out for an hour. Okay.
Can male correction officers supervise female inmates?
Yes, we can. And that, part of our policy is that anytime I enter a female unit, and that it's real easy. My voice carries pretty good, but I have to announce male officer entering. That gives anybody, because they're out there. I mean, if they're using the toilet, they can take their blanket and cover themselves. If they just got out of the shower, they can make sure that they cover themselves up. But and every single time the opposite gender comes through, we announce ourselves.
So when I was at Milwaukee County, that was different. Male COs could not supervise female inmates because a few male corrections officers made bad choices with female inmates and ended up getting arrested, mostly for sexual misconduct, which is a high felony in the corrections setting.
I'll never forget. I'm older than dirt, and that's all. I'll never forget when I went through the academy 15 years ago, the Sergeant Washington, and who's retired, great guy. And then he said, you want to sleep with inmates? Go right ahead. Just quit first. And sadly, I mean, I'll sit here and I'll rah-rah Waukesha all day long, part of the reason they send me here. And that, because I love what I do. I love who I do it for. Sadly, I can't think of a single institution that hasn't had something like that happen. And what goes through their head, I mean, who knows? I mean, but they'll even tell you when we're at the academy, and we'll tell people when I'm doing bigger classes of recruit officers, look to your left, look to your right. One of those people won't be doing this career anymore because they're going to make a bad decision. And if it's not the person to your left or right, guess who it is? You.
Well, inmate manipulation, I mean, I'm sure you guys talk about that at some point. Just like we're sitting there all day watching them, they're doing the exact same thing. So if you're sitting there and they know your interests, they know your likes, they know your schedule, they know all these things, they're gonna prey upon that the same way. They don't wanna be in there. If you're gonna give them extra attention, or you're gonna give them something, or you're gonna do something stupid, they're going to exploit that. They don't care. They're not out there looking out for your best interest, so you have to be able to do that for yourself. Especially those units. The reason why Pod 2, that seg unit, they don't see you, is that's all they're doing all day. All they have is time. So if they get to know your schedule and your routine, they're gonna pick up on that. I dye my hair, they know. I wear nail polish, they know. I have new clothes, they know. They know everything. So it's your responsibility to be able to stop it there, and this is it, and not move on from that. Because they'll know, like, oh, did you go out last night? I know you have a boyfriend, I know you have a girlfriend, I know you did this, I know you hang out with officer so-and-so. Where are you able to stop that before it gets into, oh yeah, I did go out last night, now you've opened the door a little bit, where does it stop?
I could talk for 3 hours just on manipulation, and that, you know, but that's absolutely true, and this is the best way to explain it. I'm there for an 8-hour shift, okay? So it's a cat and mouse game, all right? They're always going to try to, inmates, that's what they do. They try to manipulate, anything that they can get extra, and that they're going to try to do. So I have 8 hours to try to play the chess game and the cat and mouse game with them, right? They have 24 hours. And so even like when we're sitting at our desks and stuff, in between checks and stuff, and if you're having a conversation and they'll listen to it, or you're taking somebody to court and you're talking to another officer as you're walking to court, they look out the window. Every single cell except for Pod 3 has a window to the outside. So I'm sure it was to try to like intimidate me, but I had a guy, I have an old pickup truck, all right? And I rolled up, he's like, hey, that's an old pickup truck you got there. He's like, how do you like that thing? Do you think he really gives a shit about my old pickup truck? Or do you think that was like, hey, I know what you drive? You know what? And again, if you're worried about, if you're worried about threats and stuff like that, obviously we take every threat seriously, okay? So go ahead but see, now, they play the game. So was that a direct threat to me? No. But now, that's where it starts. So it's all about, a lot of them can be about intimidation too. And if you get an actual threat, which, I mean, probably a weekly basis I get threatened. Okay, great. Oh, you're gonna kill me when you get out? Okay, cool. All right. Lieutenant?
But how do you respond to that? So with him asking that question, what would be your response? So an inmate comes up to you and says, oh, that's a cool pickup truck you have. I mean, what's your response? Because that's gonna dictate which way this conversation's gonna go. Does anybody have any good ideas on how to answer that?
Or take the pickup truck out of there. And then, hey, CO, are you married? What's the best way to answer it? Well, you could say no. I tell officers all the time, and that the easiest solution to it is I don't talk about my personal life. It's nothing personal. I just don't talk about my outside world when I'm in here. No offense. Okay? Or you can be like me. I'll go into one pod and, CO, you married? Yep, 7 times. And okay, you have any kids? One pod I'll walk into, yep, I got 12 kids. Another pod, nope, no kids at all. let them get, they don't need to know, well, how does that, what bearing does that have on anything to do with why you're there and why I'm there? And they figure it out, you know, they get it, okay, he doesn't, you know, he doesn't play that way, you know.
That's a good thing to remember no matter where you are in the criminal justice system is, I mean, they don't just try to manipulate you while you're in jail, right? As a corrections officer, they're gonna be trying to manipulate the officers who arrest them on the road too. So a good rule of thumb is anybody you come in contact with when you're working doesn't need to know anything about your personal life.
Yeah, that's huge. And you guys have all heard about the slippery slope, right? And I can tell you, if you do start to like, because usually inmates aren't stupid. I mean, there's a real good TED Talk out there, and I'll try to get it to you. And it's about a LA County sheriff. His name's Alex. But he started out, and it's a perfect thing. It's a true story. And where it starts out where, hey, can you mail this for me? It's a Friday night, and I really need to get this to my attorney, you know, or hey, can you bring me some food, you know? I mean, if I'll be the first to admit, any inmate that's at least in our jail, they get the minimum requirements for nutrition because it's cheaper, you know. I mean, and so they don't get a ton of food, so they're always hungry. You know, they'll do a lot of stuff for food, but if you get into that slippery slope and you find yourself where you stepped in it, get in front of it. I mean, it's better like, oh man, I did this and that. I brought, you know, a candy bar, or I gave so and so. I mailed a letter for so and so, and that if you get in front of it, yeah, are you gonna get disciplined? Absolutely, you're probably gonna get disciplined. Can you maybe buy a few days off? Yeah, but if you think that they're gonna stop with a candy bar or mailing a letter, that's just to get their foot in the door. And that they're all about manipulating, and the next thing you know, you're bringing drugs in, and that. So now you're talking about, or worse yet, you're going to have a love affair with them. That still blows my mind, but like it's now it's your career and it's your freedom, and that so you're real quick will be on the other end of the bars, and that, you know, if you don't get in front of it right away, people are human, they make mistakes. I mean. You know, I mean, and I sadly, at our facility, there have been officers that have made mistakes and gotten in front of it. And yeah, they got their hand slapped and a letter in their file and bought a day or two off. But you know what? They still have a career. They're still paying their mortgage. They're still paying for their car. Where are we
Do you
going
want
next?
to talk about like the requirements and the class and like stuff like that? Like if anybody's interested in.
Yeah, anybody thinking about a career in corrections? Okay. You have to have a high school diploma. Any extra schooling that you have is definitely helpful. To be a lieutenant at the jail, you have to have that's still just a high school diploma. But if you want to be a captain, then you need a bachelor's degree. We will send you to the academy. The academy is now 6 weeks long, and it's a lot of verbatim stuff. I mean, it's not quite as intense as the actual police academy. You're not going to be shooting guns, but you're going to fight. You're going to learn probation, parole. You're going to learn charges, when somebody's allowed to be strip searched, when they're not allowed to be strip searched. You know, things like that. Let's see.
Well, I think too, I mean, when you're one person, when there's one position open and there's 10 people going for that job, what's going to make you stand out compared to them? And just even in Waukesha County, I mean, I'm really fortunate that they are 100% behind mental health, where a lot of facilities do not agree to that at all. But Waukesha County is really big on mental health and that population. So especially if you're going to work in Waukesha, like I said, if you have no psych background, you're still going to get it. But again, if there's 10 people and you can say, you know, I've gone through crisis intervention training, I've taken psych courses, I know how to communicate with people, I've done X, Y, and Z, that's going to make you stand out as opposed to the 9 other people who applied for the position. Crisis intervention, NAMI does free classes all the time. That's something you can just do on your own time. Go to NAMI, take the class, you get a certificate. awesome. It takes 2 days. So that's again, something that you have even on the road. They're doing a lot of crisis intervention training for officers on the road. I think between 12 and 15% of all calls that you're gonna get on the road are somebody that's in crisis. And how you're able to handle that's gonna determine how you move forward from there. So again, just looking at those things too on top of just, I have my degree, I'm gonna get a job.
CIT, crisis intervention training, it's on your test.
Every single officer that is employed at the Waukesha County Jail at one point in time goes through that training. I mean, I think probably close to, I mean, don't hold me to this number, but I think better than 95% of our officers have already been through it. And there's talk that they're gonna take some of us and make us train the trainers.
And we do it every year. I mean, Mark and I are doing, like he said, in service right now with the officers, so every single year you're going through it again. We do mental health and suicide risk every single year. They do the manipulation, they do all these things, so it's something that you're constantly going through again and again and again as well. So you're just always getting that information.
Would you say percentage-wise, jail population are dealing with mental health issues?
I think we just did that in class. It's 65% of people in custody have mental.
2 years ago, during the same class, that number was 20 to 30%. So that says a lot about, and it's not just mental health issues, it's socioeconomic situations that affect all that stuff, right? You think about who you're going to be dealing with on a daily basis, no matter what career you choose. All those socioeconomic factors factor into that. Inner city youth have a much higher probability of growing up and one, being confined at some point in their life, and two, growing up because of their situation with mental health issues or drug dependency or alcohol dependency issues.
So even just Waukesha County, do any of you know what services are available for people with mental illness or substance abuse just in Waukesha? Especially if you're working in Waukesha County, you should know what resources your community offers. Does anybody know? Let's just talk about psychiatric facilities, so inpatient. Does anybody know?
In the entire state, how many places do you think there are for the mental ill to go to?
What's your guess?
Couple hundred?
Maybe 100.
Maybe 100? 20?
You're probably pretty close. Yeah, I mean, just for our inmates, if they're found not competent through the court process, there are 2 facilities they can go to, Mendota and Winnebago. There are 20 beds, the forensic unit at each of those places. So you're talking about every single inmate in the entire state of Wisconsin that's mentally ill. They're gonna have to go to one of those 2 places and fill 40 beds. They're waiting in jail for sometimes 9 months to get there. There's not resources available. Does anybody know how much it costs to go to Rogers for a night, inpatient? Yeah, like $3,000 a night. Our population, they don't have that kind of money. They don't have insurance. They don't have these resources. So when we talk about that you're going to be dealing with the mentally ill and people that are using, gear up, because that's what you're going to be dealing with. So obviously I'm always going to preach mental health, that's what I do, but it is important because it's not getting better. We don't have the resources, we don't have the availability. Psychiatry, to get in to see a psychiatrist, is 6 to 9 months. If you're in the middle of a crisis, good luck. You have 6 months to figure it out. Most of them will turn to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate for that. So now you have 2 issues. So just thinking about that too and what's available in your community, and if you're dealing with somebody in crisis on the street, are you able to offer them something like, hi, I know that you can go to Health and Human Services or NAMI or 16th Street. Educate yourself on where you can send people that don't necessarily need to come to jail.
Where do you think most, I mean, as society and at the mental ill, do you think as just normal citizens in it, do you think we want them to just walk around on the streets? No. So there's 2 places for them to go, and if they don't go there, where do you think they go? Yeah, they come to jail. And that, so again, I mean, and like we said, just a couple of years ago, that number's almost doubled. And it's you guys are going to be the future of corrections and future of law enforcement. Okay. The job is getting tougher every day. So again, I'm going to rah-rah Waukesha a little bit. We train, and then we train some more, and then we train some more, and then we train some more. We are always at the forefront of just about any kind of training you can imagine. We do just in this interpersonal communications or IPC or verbal judo, and that when you start with us, and that you will do a 3 hours like mini session of that, and that you'll instantly go into our POSC or like our DAT. Okay, we call it POSC, and that POSC is I knew you were gonna say that.
Principles of subject control.
Yes. So, but just to give you an example, I mean, and I'm not trying to weigh one versus the other, but you get 2 hours of POSC or learning how to defend yourself, and you get 4 days of learning how to talk to people. Kind of puts it in perspective, right? I mean, you know, I can't emphasize enough that if you can't talk to people. Now, does IPC, interpersonal communications, does that work for everybody? Absolutely not. We got a guy, I can't mention his name, but I think everybody kind of knows him, and he's a Waukesha guy. He has yet to go to court, and that he had a little stint with a lighter. Everybody know who I'm talking about? Nobody knows what I'm talking about? It happened right out here. Yeah, he's a real fantastic individual. Let me just say that. But you know, I'm one of the teachers of IPC. So, Mark, you know, go talk to him. You know, and I said, all right, you know, Mr. Can't use his name yet. It's time to go to court. Suck my penis. It's not going to happen. But, you know, we do have to get you to court. The judge really wants to see you. And that, all he would say is, suck my nonstop. So I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that, oh, well, you're going to be able to reach everybody. That's not going to happen. That's why we have things like this over here. And I mean, if you think you can punch me, the biggest guy in here, I'll put that vest on and go ahead and lay one on me. And then I'll lay one on you, and we'll see who's still standing. I mean, like I said, I'm not the biggest guy in the world, or if I think that it's not going to be a fair fight, I mean, I'll nail you with a pepper ball gun, and that, or I'll tase you, or I'll spray you. And that, I mean, has anybody been sprayed here? Okay, where were you sprayed at?
Cat Battles in California.
Okay.
Military.
Oh yeah. Well, so all right. So you dealt with some hot stuff. I mean, so not like your girlfriend's keychain. I mean, I got guys at my work that'll drink that. What is it? The keychain ones it's shoe Scoville heat units. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's
Drink
cute.
it.
That's cute. You could probably spray that to me, and
Drink it.
I'd still take your wallet. But now everybody, that's another thing too, is like when you go through the Jailers Academy, everybody gets sprayed. And that, okay? So you have to be able to not only take a shot of OC, and it's not like your keychain, which is nice. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that'll get you, you know, where you could run, okay? And that, but even you're in jail, you give me where am I gonna run to? You know, I need something that's gonna decapacitate somebody, and I gotta be able to, we get sprayed so that I can fight through the effects, because friendly fire, you know? We always announce spray, and that before we're gonna spray somebody. Why do you think we do that? Yeah, so I know it's coming. If I'm tasseling with them and I hear the word spray, I'm gonna turn so that I don't catch a direct shot. But if I do get a direct shot, I know what it's gonna, I have to be able to testify to the effects of it. And that same thing, like if this is gonna change, and that, I think everybody's gonna have to take a taser shot. And that, right now, when you're on the CERT team, you have to take a taser shot. And that, I'll tell you, longest 7 seconds of my life. But I say this too, the stuff that we have is, I'll take a taser shot before every shift if you keep the OC away from me. Because that's like probably, does it say what your shoe is on that, on your keychain? Might not. It's probably around 500, I'm guessing.
Here's another fun fact about OC spray, is that it also works if you just spray it on skin. So we had one guy, when I was in the jail working on the CERT team, he refused to come out. He had to go to court as well. He was naked in his cell. So my lieutenant at the time, Lieutenant Ninkovich, The inmates called him 6'9". He was 6'9" Russian guy, just built. He's like, all right, spray's coming. Cover up what you want to. And he covered his face. Where do you think he went? Balls. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then here's the other thing is after you wash it off, baby shampoo is a miracle thing, right? You use baby shampoo to get it off you, and they'll tell you in the academy that you get sprayed in the face. Don't look down when you're showering.
You're going to wash your hair like this.
Yeah. Young Mock 15 years ago, he didn't listen. He looked down, and that activates. And when it activates on that area, it's probably 10 times worse than it was in the face, to be honest with you. And that, so you had sprayed, and that, the best way I can explain it about being sprayed, I guess, is like, there's a couple of things. And that, first of all, it's hot as shit, but we all know that, right? Okay, the best way I can explain it is like, basically take some sand and put it on your stove and get it nice and hot. And then throw it in somebody's face. And that, because it feels like it sticks on you, and then you want, it also has the stuff that we use is 2 million Scoville heat units. And that, so it will actually, if you know, your mild complexion, you will be as red as a tomato for days. And that, because it will actually, like, it'll only catch the first couple of layers of skin, and that, but it also gives you that sensation of you can't breathe. And that's why I always tell people, like, we get somebody that's a real problem child, I'm like, don't worry, he or she will give us an opportunity. You know, and then you'll have that opportunity to be able to use one of the tools that we have to use on them. And the weirdest sensation, you'll be able to attest to this too, is that you just went into like a gas-filled room, right? Or did they actually hit you with one?
They had a scan, close their eyes and mouth, and did a pass across their eyes.
Okay, and then to get it off of you, what did they do? Hit you with water, right?
They let us use Johnson & Johnson.
Right, but okay, so now what we do is now the person usually gives up pretty much real quick after that. So now they're in a chair, they can't use their arms and that. So we're washing their face and that, okay? Like I said, it gives you the sensation that you can't breathe. Now, what do you think is happening when I'm putting water in your face? Because I'm there to help you. You feel like you're drowning. So it's to me, that's the best tool we have. And then we got creative too, because guys would be they'd be in a day room and fuck you, I ain't going in, right? Okay, and then they'll hide around in a corner, right? Okay, hide all you want. Now I'll take this little number. Everybody play ping-pong? Okay, you're hiding behind behind one of the walls. I'll wrap a couple of them off the ceiling, and there's pepper balls. So now I'm going to rain pepper spray on you. And try to hide from that. Or if you're dumb enough to come out and let me give you a real shot, I mean, anybody been hit with a real good pepper ball gun? Or a paintball gun? Leaves a welt, right? Yeah. Well, now a welt with some juice behind it, you know. What else we got?
I think just with going off of like how great Waukesha is, there are, even if you're not, let's say, a lieutenant, there's a lot of different things that you can get into as a correctional officer that kind of builds up that resume. So he's talked about CERT, what's the crisis debriefing,
Oh.
so there's a bunch of different things that he can talk about quick that you can get into just to kind of add to that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so just like, well, whether you want to be an on-the-road guy or girl, and you come into the jail, first of all, I'll rah-rah Waukesha some more, because coming into the jail, and I made a career out of the jail, okay? But our department, more and more, as far as like the actual sheriff's department, has pulled more people out of the jail than they pull from anywhere else. It's getting better also the academy, it's no joke that the academy is not cheap, the police academy. And that's so, a lot of times in that it's getting better now that we're actually, not only we're recruiting from within inside the jail, but we're also paying for the academy first. And not everybody, it's at certain times. I don't want to sell you guys a bill of goods that's not going to come true. But now also inside the jail, and that you can be a CERT member. You can, only certain officers can work in our special needs pod.
Which is huge. Because you have an officer that doesn't know anything about mental health, they're not going to allow you to work in those pods. Which again is a benefit to be able to say, I'm allowed to work in these special areas because I know more than the average CO.
Well, in Milwaukee County, and that, for example, and that the officers, you have one officer that does search, and then they go to another guy, and then that person will do pictures and prints, and then they have actual medical staff that do their med screens, and that so in our intake office, you do everything, and that you bring them in through the arresting officer's vestibule, and that you pat them down, you strip them in, put them into our clothes. I do all the med screen. PREA, you guys have talked about PREA, right? Oh. PREA is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. Oh my God, I just did this for like 3 days. Because that's the biggest fear is that, you know, everybody when they first come to jail, they're worried about, well, what do they know about jail? Well, you know, they take away everything away from me and I'm going to get raped by, you know, the guy in the cell next to me, right? Which doesn't happen. But you can become a crisis intervention partner in it, which, like I said, everybody ends up doing that with us. The CERT team, the SISM team, that's kind of like my baby, and that I guess we'll kind of. Oh, okay. One of the things I'm most proud about with Waukesha is our SISM team. Okay, so. What happens is like, we all know that like law enforcement and stuff like that is a thankless job, okay? And there's things that happen whether you're on the road, and I'm only gonna speak about in corrections, okay? But there's traumatic events. I mean, we've had inmates try to hang themselves. We've had officer assaults, okay? So I've been advocating for years, and we finally got our way. We have our SISM team, okay? And there's a lot of jokes that get made about the team. We're called every name in the book. We're called the Sunshine Club. We're called all this shit. And my thing is like, hey, if you never need us as a SISM team, what we are is we're a peer support group, okay? And what happens is after something traumatic happens, then the SISM team comes into it and we do a debriefing. There's no administration that's in there. Nothing gets sent back to a lieutenant. It's not to say, well, this wouldn't have happened, but so-and-so fucked up. It's all to talk about how you're dealing with stuff.
Crisis intervention, or
Critical incident support member. Yeah. I'll give an example of like something that happened to me personally, because that way I can talk about anything I want with this, okay? Like I said, 15 years I've been doing this, and just when you think that you've seen everything, somebody seems to be able to drain a little more water out of the pool, okay? I was working, and I'll tell you this too, trust your gut, or if you have those little hairs that stand up in the back of your neck, normal morning, we had a guy in the hole, said he wanted to use the phone, okay? Me and the officer I'm working with, we look up and go, okay, can you come out? There's nobody else out in the day room, and so we locked all the other doors, let him out of the cell, okay? He walked out, didn't run out or anything like that, and went from the lower tier to the upper tier. And we're watching him, we're like, where the hell's he going? We're like, hey, where are you heading? And then we're like, okay, again, we talked about food, figured he's getting some food from somebody, or they have a PIN number for using the phone, maybe he was getting a number from somebody, whatever. I mean, it wasn't like any cause for alarm at that time, okay? He got to the top of the stairs, put one leg over, and I instantly went, oh shit. And thought he was Superman and did a nosedive right off the upper tier. Landed straight on his head. Instant pool of blood. Right arm is just sitting there twitching. I thought that he's dead for sure. Okay? So that, I guess, so we have our SISM team, okay, and I'm that person that what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how you feel about the incident and stuff like that. First of all, And that what I didn't expect is I knew that there was going to be an emotional dump, because anytime something traumatic happens, you're going to have that emotional dump, right? I wasn't expecting 3 or 4 of them, because I was just sitting at home and I was like fucking just bawling, and I was like, what the fuck's wrong with me? You know, I'm just watching TV, nothing was going on, and I just started crying for no freaking reason. You know, but it's like, and so all kinds of stuff like this kind of happens to cops on the road and people in our jail. And that, but you know what it was for me? It wasn't with that. It's not like I kept like replaying it, although it did seem like it happened in slow motion. He ended up making it, by the way. I made it all the way over to Huber. But it wasn't what the visual, but I like a month later, a brother of mine was at a bowling alley, and somebody took a ball and, like, you know, their fingers got stuck in it or whatever, and like launched the ball a little bit, and that sound triggered everything again. So so I guess, I mean, I guess you'd have to say I have a form of PTSD from it, but where do correctional officers we didn't have an outlet until Waukesha did our CISM team. We didn't have an outlet for us to be able to talk about stuff that happened, because, okay, again, I've been there for 15 years. Do you think there's a lot of cops or a lot of correctional officers that go, hey, after this happened, I went home and I cried? It's a kudos to Waukesha, because this is needed. And police agencies have had forms of this for years. And that they have usually they have like a partner. There's another officer that's kind of like, I forget what they call it. Anyway, but we have an entire team. So what we do is when a critical incident happens is we get everybody that was involved, okay, and it's mandatory. And, okay, first of all, I get people that bellyache that, I'm fine, why do I have to be here, okay? And I'm glad that you are fine, okay? But what we do is everybody just, you don't have to talk about your feelings or anything like that, but what you do have to talk about is what happened through the incident, okay? And what's shocking is some of the people that like push the hardest against why I have to go to this end up talking the most and get the most out of it. And that because, what I tell people too is like, okay, you may not need anything, but just saying what you did and how you felt when this event happened, and that might help out 6 officers that were involved in this. You know, because, I mean, think about it. Like, all right, my incident, okay? Master Control was able to watch the whole thing happen. They're stuck in a room with nothing but TV sets opening up doors to get people in and out of there. Okay? You want to talk about a helpless feeling? Be in Master Control when something major is going on. Because, yeah, you're essential, because you got to get people in there for a response, right? But if you're a guy like me that's like, used to be on the CERT team, you know, used to be a CERT commander, all this stuff, you know, and you're always like, well, you want to be that guy that's in there and that I'm in the trenches with my brothers and sisters, right? And that now you're stuck in a room, and that could trigger something. It has triggered stuff for people when incidents happen.
Even officers that aren't in the facility. I mean, there's been other instances where we've had, I mean, luckily he made it, but that's not always the case. And there's officers that aren't even in the facility and coming back to work the next day. I mean, it is different. So that's why it's so important to have those things, because maybe you're not affected right that moment, but a month from now, 2 months from now, I mean, trauma and how those things present are very different. When we had an attempt, I was at Target, I think like a month later, and somebody on the radio said something and I almost lost my shit. Just because like the tone of her voice, and that's for me, you know, I'm not in the pod, so I hear something happening on this radio and it's this instant reaction. So for me, it was walking around Target and hearing somebody talking on their walkie-talkie. I like lost my mind because it triggered that of what had happened with another incident. And that's why it's good to have these things, because you always have somebody to go back to, even if it doesn't affect you maybe that day or that month or that year. I mean, it can happen at any time.
And it's important to remember, I mean, you don't picture Mock as the guy that's going to sit in front of his TV crying, right? But everybody reacts to trauma differently, and all those reactions are normal reactions to traumatic incidents. So you will all, if you continue down this career path, you will all be faced with traumatic events that happen. It's important to have that in the back of your head, like this is normal, I need to talk to somebody. And that's really where law enforcement as a whole is moving towards, breaking down those barriers and making it okay for people to get help. I think every agency, law enforcement, critical
incident response members.
So we call it critical incident stress management. There's critical incident stress debriefing teams in the county. So whenever we have like a traumatic event in the field, our dispatchers go and like Mock said, you might be okay, but what you say in those debriefs could help somebody, one of your partners tenfold. So always be open to that.
Are there any questions, like if anybody's interested in Waukesha, does anybody have questions for Mock on how to go through that process or what that looks like?
What is your unit?
I run the mental health department, so I'm the mental health coordinator at the jail. So I oversee all the mental health treatment and care. I also do all the officer training, so mental health and suicide, because obviously suicide is really big in law enforcement and corrections, so we train the officers every year on the warning signs, the risk factors, that type of thing. And just, I'm a huge, I call them patients, obviously, I'm a huge patient advocate. As the officers know, I'll get pretty shitty if I feel like somebody is not being treated the same as maybe their general population peers when we talk about our mentally ill population. So I really am there for the inmates in a sense.
I guess, I mean, again, I'm like an old piece of furniture there, and that, but it's my perception of when I first got into the jail was that just like a lot of like the kind of how the public kind of looked at it is, oh, they broke the law. Well, lock them up, throw away the key, give them bread and water, don't give them shit. You know, I tell people like, oh yeah, they're watching TV. Oh, they get TV? Why the fuck are you giving them TV? Well, you know, I mean, first of all, I mean, if you're a correctional officer, the TV is one of your best babysitters.
So we're cross for puzzles.
Right. But, you know, the whole thing is it's like, it's a career that not everybody can do. I have tons of friends that are in law enforcement. I mean, basically you name an agency that you can, you know, I know somebody on that. And I had my opportunities to go and be on the road, and that if I wanted to, but I chose to stay inside the jail because.
Yeah, well, like when you mentioned, like there are different like opportunities besides being a corrections officer, like what goes on?
Well, I mean, inside while you're a correctional officer, you can be a member of the SISM team, you can be on our CERT team. We, like I said, we promote, like, I don't think in my 15 years, we have not had a supervisor position get filled by somebody that wasn't a correctional officer to start with.
So even just besides the corrections, obviously, a lot of people don't know that there's 24/7 nursing care, there's mental health, there's a dentist that comes in. So even if you're not looking at law enforcement, there's that piece. I have an AODA counselor that runs groups with the privilege pods, and we do that. WCTC, there's teachers that come in and teach. We have a CDL course in there that's run, I think, by WCTC as well. There's those things. We have, who else works in there? I mean, there's clerks if you're interested in doing that type of thing. So not even just if you're interested in corrections, but not as an officer, there's a lot of different avenues that way too that's outside of that.
Or if you want to be a member of the actual sheriff's department and be a deputy on the road, corrections is a great stepping stone. Like I said, more and more, they're starting to pull correctional officers. And that, you know, and because, and I'm not, you know, they put it out on WileyNet and all the other websites in it that are out there, but you already kind of have your foot in the door, you know.
And they know the kind of training and work that the correctional officers at the jail are getting, so I think that's also why they're pulling from.
Just using IPC and just using our SISM team, I help train deputies. So, like I said, a lot of times in that you get, when people talk about corrections, they're like, oh, well, you know, you're an adult babysitter. Okay, I mean, there's some truth to that, I ain't gonna lie. But if you think that that's all what my job is, come walk around with me for a couple of days and we'll see how you feel after that, okay? Like I said, I have tons of friends in that are that are Milwaukee PD. I mean, like I said, name an agency, chances are I know somebody, okay? And 90% of them go, Mock, there ain't no fucking way in hell I could do what you do. Because what happens, if you're a cop on the road, your interaction with them is, okay, I defuse the situation, I get him, put him or her in cuffs, and that I fill out my paperwork for the charges, write my tickets and that, and then I hand them off to corrections, right? Off to the next one. Now, it's somebody that's a no person. Well, okay, you can call X amount of cops and that to come and help you, and you'll maybe put somebody in a restraint chair or something like that. Ultimately, where do they end up? By me. Now, do you think I can leave somebody, him or her, in a restraint chair for a year? Eventually, I got to deal with those people, right? So, if corrections is, I'll sit here, I mean, and I'll go toe to toe with any on the road cop. You know, as far as like, well, you have to do this. Okay, now, an on the road cop, you come around a building and there could be a guy with a gun, right? You don't know what you're stepping into. I'm not trying to say that being an on the road cop is a bad decision because, like I said, great, you know. But I just got done telling you, I could have 48 inmates that they could all be potential murderers. And I have nothing but a can of OC and my mouth. I mean, that's not tough?
I put that plug in earlier this semester about starting in corrections for anything in this career field. I think it's uber important to develop those communication skills because one, it's going to keep you safe on the road if you do choose to go that way. And two, it comes back to the respect thing that Mock talked about and I talked about earlier in the semester. That's the only thing that inmates in the jail have, and a lot of times, depending on the situation outside of jail, could be the only thing they have outside of jail too. Those communication skills are going to protect you in the long run.
I'll agree with that. If you want to be an on the road cop, okay, and you can get an opportunity to work inside of a jail, you will. I'll guarantee it. You'll be a better on the road cop. Absolutely.
Well, with COVID, when a lot of them were working in the jail, and it was a complete eye-opener.
Oh, that was
to
interesting.
have
Yeah.
them sit with their people.
Yeah.
Many of them didn't even want to walk into the pods. So imagine how they're treating people in the community if they're scared to walk into a unit.
Deputies are working?
Yes.
Yeah. For a short period of time. Because we at one time with COVID, not because.
Once upon a time.
Well, it wasn't because there was a whole bunch of cases of COVID, but we went like way to the extreme that if you had contact with this person and that person. Well, at one time we had 25 officers that were out. And so, I mean, when you have 25 officers out, we had to get people from somewhere.
How many officers do you have?
All three shifts, I believe our numbers are 115 to 120.
How many per shift?
First and second shift, I think obviously it's rotating schedules and stuff like that, but I think there's 22 to 23 people, first and second shift. Third shift, all the inmates are locked in. They get locked in at 10:30 at night, and they stay locked in until 7:30 in the morning. So you don't need as much staff, and I think it's about 17 on thirds.
Last minute questions?
Great question. I think we started at about 2150, and then there's 12 steps in that you accomplish. Okay, they're merit increases. Okay, so after you're there for 6 months, and then you go from step 1 to step 2 because that means that you made it through training. You basically made it through, and that's training through us. Okay, sometime in that first year, you'll go to the Jailers Academy, and that once you pass the Jailers Academy, and that you'll come back, and then as usually after that first 6 months, every year after that, you should be up for a merit increase. And after 12 years, you top out, and I think we top out now at I think it's 3150. Oh, if you like overtime, corrections is for you. We have that's been like that since the dawn of time. We've always had a ton of overtime. Another thing that Waukesha is doing now too for us old fossils and that have been maxed out for a while, And that is, we also have performance bonuses that we get now too. So again, like I mean, there's pretty much anything in a hat there that I don't wear. And that, so I can get up to a 3% bonus. And so I don't know, somebody do the math, 67,000 plus 3%.
And then you get across the board raise that everybody in the county gets too, which is usually 1 to 3% somewhere in there, on top of your merit, on top of your bonus.
And the whole thing is like, you know, when you boil it down too, and then I'm always gonna rah corrections a little more. You're really not making a whole lot less than you are on a cop on the road. One of my real close friends in corrections was over 100K. I mean, in overtime.
How many like incidents like you say you have like every week?
What do you mean by an incident?
Like you have like all of
Backup calls.
Real backup?
Yeah,
calls or
there's,
just
I mean, 'cause-
bullshit,
that. Like how
like,
many times have you gotten into a fight like recently?
oh.
How many times have I what?
Like how many times have you gotten into a fight like recently?
Oh, it didn't. I'm not going to say it never happens because we do have sudden assaults. Okay, but again, we're trained in that, and our POSC instructors will have you so ready that. Could you get hit? Well, let me answer your question first. I think in the last year, I think there were maybe 4 sudden assaults. Okay, and now a sudden assault.
Officer or inmate to inmate?
Well, inmate to inmate is completely different. I'm talking just officers. And you said how many times did I get in a fight? Okay, but potentially there was 4 like what you'd call sudden assaults. Now a sudden assault could be somebody. We had a guy that just tried to headbutt an officer. That's a sudden assault. Okay, so but you're trained so good, and it's I don't know if it's what ends up happening is you wind up going into what we call do mode. And that, like, we do CPR and stuff like that, and everybody will do this. Oh, I gotta do CPR training again. Okay, somebody that's done CPR, when that person fell and I had to do CPR, I didn't even think about it. I was on it. Okay, our POSC instructors and when we do all of our training, it's wild because you wind up getting into a mode where you don't even think about it. You just react, and I think that's like that for just about any department. But like just in that example, the headbutt, that guy was turned around and wall stabilized before he was done throwing his head to try to headbutt the officer. Again, that's kudos to our training officers, to our training and stuff like that. You know, I mean, we don't get a lot of like weapons kind of stuff because, I mean, I'm not allowed to carry a weapon in there, so there better not be any weapons inside there. But that's a whole nother thing, and I could talk for 4 hours about that, about the weapons that they try to make. But again, we're trained real good too that we do shakedowns and stuff like that, and we'll confiscate stuff. I mean, guys, you know, things that try to be brought into the jail. I mean, we had a guy that was hiding razor blades inside of his paperwork. Said just had it just there because I lined myself up for court. Sure you did. I end up finding a razor in my back someday. But so your training that you're gonna get, we're not gonna just throw you out there. First of all, when you start with us too, and you'll do 35 days with a veteran officer, a JTO or an FTO. Okay, so we're not gonna, and we're gonna policy you to death, and that we're gonna make sure that you're ready to do the job before you're on your own, and then even when you're on your own. I'm a GTO too, and so even when you're on your own, I'm still watching you, even though you don't realize I'm watching you. So that's another thing that I can say about our facility too, is that I think some places you get like 2 weeks of training, and that we'll give you like 40 days, and then like I said, we're gonna pair you up with somebody like myself that's been there for forever on that, and. The sad thing is like whether it's out on the road or in corrections, it's not like I can say, okay, this happened. Now this is how you do it. Because like I said, just when you think that you've learned everything and you've seen everything, somebody can take a little more water out of the pool.
All right, guys, thank you, Mark and Lauren, for coming.